Hello, good morning. It's about 56 degrees this morning here in Northwest Florida. Kind of windy. It rained overnight, and it is getting along here in February. I think it's about the 8th. Don't ask me. I'll be lying to you. I don't have to go to work, so there you have it. I'm going to do you a garden walk of my bonsai stuff, primarily things I've been working on here in the last few weeks, and also I get to document things that I've done so I can review them later. But we're going to just take a garden walk. I haven't done a garden walk in quite a while, and we're going to start primarily with the things I've just worked on. And even for me, I'm kind of amazed. Right here is a Trident maple root over rock configuration. This is a pretty large rock. It probably weighs about 30 or 40 pounds, the rock itself. And the trunk on this Trident maple, well, actually, I grafted on this main part here that you see coming up, and it took over and grew even faster than the main trunk, which is this upright part here. So anyway, this is what I'm working on. That's a Trident maple root over rock. I dug it just this week, earlier this week, and right now I'm grafting on more material because I actually took off part of the graft right here. I removed that lower part to create a entirely new tree, and so I'm grafting on here, and I'll be doing a lot more grafting in this area because the tree did not clasp around the trunk like I wanted it to. So at any rate, hey, when you got lemons, make a lemon pie. Also, I'm trying right here in the garden some rooting pieces of Trident maple. I've stuck probably 30 or 40 pieces here right underneath this Japanese red maple, but it stays moist. It's somewhat protected, and we'll see what I can get out of that. This is a Chinese elm, and I'm trying to root different pieces off of this. I want to make a real short base, and this elm is really slender, so the shorter I can get it, the fatter the top of it will look. And of course, that'll be a whole new tree, or I'll take pieces off of it. This looks promising, this upright with this armature coming out here looks promising for a cascade. And right now that's just so small. But here we have a section here on the remaining part of that trunk, so I'll be able to work different things with that. These are bottle brush trees, and I just potted these. Well, actually I potted them up out of their cutting containers, where I stuck them multiple pieces in one container, and they're starting to firm up in the pot on their own roots. But I stuck them in, I think it was early January, and yeah, we were still getting cold weathers and frost. So these are things that I'm working on here recently, or anticipating working on. These are plums. Some friends gave me either trees or cuttings. The cuttings I rooted pieces, and I grafted pieces of the cuttings onto let's say wild plum trees that you see here. And as you can see, I've got some blooms issuing from this particular tree, and these were rooted cuttings. That large one there is about 2 inches. This is about 1.25 inches. that large upright back there is about 2 inches. So, and I've got a bed of cuttings of Trident maples, pots of Trident maples. I just dug up 2 Trident maples out of this in this culvert affair. That's a drain, piece of a field drain tube that I grew the Trident maples in, and by my estimate, it was a pretty good success in my experiment on growing those fast and growing extended roots for root over rock exposed roots. And so I've got the information I need out of that. I've been working on elm trees pretty much from stock material that I've been growing for a while. Some material I've wired over the years and unwired and rewired, and now I'm trying to dress them up and do something with them. This is probably going to remain just as it is. I'll just clean it up, do some carving on the dead wood, some finalized wiring, but this will probably be a typical upright tree with a wide crown. I'll be working on this Japanese green maple. Over the past couple of years, it leaned over a lot more than I wanted it to, so I'll be repotting this, cleaning up the roots, trimming that, and leaning this out, and deciding if I want to take one of these 2 branches off. And you can see that right there. I am actually grafting this, an autograft if you will, grafting this branch onto this larger upright branch. So no matter which way I go, I'll have a nice lower branch on this tree going in the opposite direction from the next branch. And if I choose to air layer this entire branch off, you know, I'll have a better tree at the end. So anyway, I'm considering what to do with the 2 branches here, because they really clash with one another. And I'm not sure if the video will really capture that, but they do really clash with one another the way it is. So I'm working on that. I just put this together yesterday. I've been growing this Trident maple for the past 9 years, actually mostly right here in this spot on the ground here, underneath this plum tree. And I dug it up, I think it was actually in late 2017, early 2018, and I had it in that container right there. That's an oval pot, and I think that's about 17 inches. But anyway, that's a concrete pot that I made, and I made it out of just your regular Sackcrete kind of concrete mix, not the hydraulic cement, but it seemed to be pretty sturdy. I've created a support base for it to keep it in a position similar to what it is now. But again, I'm viewing the tree overall for branch selection. I did a little temporary wiring right here, and I've noticed some areas here that I'll have to work on also. Just a couple of, that's a Japanese green maple that I had from a cutting that I'm working on. I just trimmed up this Japanese green maple. I really do like the trunk, the twin trunk here. You see I did some carving right in that and the top of this. I cut these branches back, and I fertilized it. So this year I'll let it go in this pot. Next year I'll take it out, put it in a flat pot. And this was a seedling that I've been growing for a while of a Japanese green maple, and I like the curve in it. So right now I'm just growing it out in this pot and getting some definition in it. These were pieces of Trident maples from work that I did yesterday, and as often as I can find a place to root these things, whether directly in the ground or not, I'm going to try to root it. On that root over rock affair that I showed earlier, this is the piece that I removed from it, and the upright here is about 7 feet, but the first 12 to 18 inches is what I want to work with initially on that. So I'm considering air layering this upright and then stick it in the ground and let it go like that. So since I'm over here, let's go this way and we can see some of the other things that I'm working on. And that's a huge crepe myrtle that I repotted this week, and did some carving on that side and that side, cleaned up that stump there. This stump was removed earlier, and I just cleaned it up. I put a little lime sulfur on here to help preserve the wood. That was a lot of punky wood back in here, so I cleaned that up, lime sulfured it. I'm using B1, and this also was punky wood, and I carved that up. That root may very well come off yet, but we'll see. That knot right there, I cleaned it up, put a little lime sulfur in there to preserve it. All of these areas here, I cleaned the wood and scored the margins of the bark so that new growth will come. I didn't add lime sulfur to this wood, so basically I just washed it and cleaned it, scrubbed it a little bit, and that's an awesome trunk. A garden reject, or I should say a landscape reject, when a water line ruptured and the tree was pushed aside, and a friend of mine offered me that, and even though I didn't want it and I said no initially, I took it. This came at the same time from the same place due to a ruptured water line, and I did some carving on this. You can see that trunk died out, and so I carved on it. Same here, and I'll be doing some more as this progresses. And I thought about just actually splitting this into several pieces and carving the base of it, but I think this this configuration is going to work. Got the dead wood here, which will be all bleached out, and in some cases the darker interior parts will be painted with a darker color, and these areas will be cleaned. There are fungus, and this is where the burl of a tree is created. Okay, so I'll clean this off and expose that wood, and then I'll shellac it. I'll add some polyurethane or wood stain to bring out the swirls in this wood. But yeah, that's where the burl is created because of fungus in the tree. And you can see the other side of that Trident maple. So I've got some healing to do. This is where I separated the tree from the root over rock configuration. And this is another crepe myrtle, multi-trunk. I dug that up about a month ago now, cut it back and such, and I wrapped it in newspaper and covered it up in that plastic, and it'll be good like that for the rest of this year. And of course I put, you know, a B1 solution in it to stimulate roots, and I'll use a fertilizer on it as time goes on. Right here in the ground, I've got cuttings. This is from my Naruto Trident maple, and this is the regular Trident maples. Okay, Naruto, that's where the leaves look like they're always dehydrated, and they curl in, but that's the way the tree looks. And that's the Trident maple that I mentioned, Naruto Trident maple. This that I'm pointing at now is a popcorn tree, Chinese tallow. And I dug that up. There is another crepe myrtle multi-trunk stump that I had planted the stump and let it grow back. So I'll be working on that, cutting it back as I see fit, and grinding out the stump itself. And right here is one of my pride and joys. That is a small leaf Trident maple. Yep, small leaf. Yeah, the Trident maple leaves on the normal Acer bergeron reduces pretty readily, but this is naturally small. Okay, once it's containerized, I mean, it just shrinks down to, I think the smallest one I've seen on a mature branch is basically half the size of my pinky finger. So that's about a 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. And this is notoriously difficult to root from cuttings and such. So, of course, I'm working on that, trying to get the right time of year, time of seasons. I've taken hundreds, yes, hundreds of cuttings off of this tree. And you can see I just cut it down recently because the wounds are still healing, you know, here and there. But I've taken hundreds of cuttings and all but 2 failed, you know, and that was my original shot at it. And I've taken hundreds more since then. The entire lot failed. So, and believe me, I'm no Johnny-come-lately on cuttings. And so I'm working on a system, working on a process to develop more of these trees. And even as I look online at nurseries that provide this, they'll tell you right out, these things are difficult to propagate, and the price reflects that. So there you have it. This is an oblongatum. Okay, it's a Trident maple, but it's called oblongatum. So I plan on air layering this out to this season and doing something with it. And the tree right now is probably 15 feet tall, 12 to 15 feet tall. And I've got rooted cuttings, or they're rooting actually. I see sprouts coming out, but that's not 100% that they'll actually be rooted. And these are mulberry trees. And this stand right here, these plants, they were cuttings. I stuck in there, they rooted. But when I did that, it was in a warmer part of the year. And all of this mustard, I've got 3 or 4 trees in here that I have to dig out, Japanese green maples. And I love the seeds and the yellow flowers. You can even eat the yellow flowers in a salad, but the birds thrive on the seeds and the plants. So here we go. This is a walk through my garden, primarily things that I'm working on, but we'll have a few interesting things in here. And that's a Trident maple that I've been working on from a seedling. In fact, it came from this very spot, from seeds off of this tree. And you can see the pots in this tree. And this year, I'm going to try to air layer out some of these younger looking uprights. I don't know if this camera can capture the grain and the texture of these. This upright is older looking than that upright or the upright farther in the background. These are younger, tender uprights, and they will do much better than an older upright. But guess what? My expectation is that everything I touch turns to gold when I want it to. I don't want my beans to turn to gold when I'm trying to eat it. But anyway, this tree, in my mind's eye, is coming up. I'm going to take these uprights, like I say, and then cut the top part of this tree out to encourage back budding in the lower areas. I've done it once. You can see the big cuts here, and you can see that up there, which I do have that air layer in my pocket. But this is one of the first uprights or back budding that occurred when I cut a lot of this out. Okay, so I'll cut these back, and then I'll end up cutting the top of this tree out, and hopefully I'll get more back budding. And then when I get it down to a suitable height to satisfy me, the tree will remain in the ground for a number of years to heal. Okay, and even as it's healing, I'll section out parts of the roots to cut back to encourage regrowth on the root tips. But that tree at the base right now is probably 16, 17 inches. The last I measured it, it was right at about 13 inches when I was going to do this, more than 5 years ago, but I never got around to it. And you can see that. See how nice and young those look as compared to these branches here. Say even that branch. So these will root a lot quicker. So anyway, as I said, that tree is an offspring of this tree, and this tree, which was a cutting that I struck years ago, nearly 30 years, well, up to about 30 years ago, and it produces seeds and such, and I took hundreds of seeds, and so some of my trees are directly from this tree, and that's a little Chinese elm grove that my neighbor threw the flagstone out, or the little flat rock, and there was like 3 pieces there on the side of the road, so I took them. I had some cuttings, and I put the cuttings on there. So I just finished trimming this back from the unsightly, out of place pieces, but the leaves are reducing very well, and I've had this probably 3 or 4 years now in this configuration. The cuttings obviously are older than that, but that's the way that goes. And that Trident maple right there, I just love that base. I call it a chicken butt because the roots did not emanate from that part, which was the very bottom. It came out on this one side, and so you can see there. Hopefully you can see there, but I keep threatening to cut this down to make a shohin tree, and I just might do that because as I get older, it's like, yeah, I need to have smaller trees because I can't manage this. But anyway, this tree is actually the top out of that tree. That tree is the last of 2 bundles of 15 trees that I bought from Brussels Bonsai years and years ago. That was an original tree. That is the last you know, I would either make configurations, you know, and so, and that was the ugliest tree I had in the bunch. And it's like, well, I can't sell it, I can't do anything with it. So I just grew it in the ground for a while, and then I moved the tree, I cut the top out, and that was probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches at the time. When I cut it out, I stuck it in a pot, put some plastic over it, and lo and behold, it rooted. And those were my working days also, and so I'd check on it when I would get home from work, or when I had the chance to. And it took, and so I'm happy about that. These are seedlings, or in some cases cuttings. I would cut a branch off of these very trees, stick it in the ground right next to these Trident maples, and some of these I've cut back to start working on them. And there you have it. This tree right here, this, I call it a 3-trunk affair, this Trident maple. It is also a formerly a seedling from the grass right here, and it is the same age as this Trident maple I showed you here, except I grew it in the ground a bit longer, and I really manipulated the configuration according to what I saw growing in the tree at the time. So a lot of times, even, you know, I kind of like my trees to grow kind of naturally, and I don't do very much to change the direction that it's going. But this one I really did, as they say, I really messed this joker up. This was a taller branch. It was way up here at one point. You know, it was probably another 18 inches higher, and I reduced it. This branch right here, I wired it, and I realized that where the wire was and everything, the wire remains in the branch even now, so I could never cut that branch with normal tools. And if I were to get rid of this, there would be a notation or a tag attached to it that branch has metal in it, and so someone wouldn't injure themselves with power tools or damage their expensive equipment. So this is my little garden walk, and lots of sarissas here. And my sarissas are, these are the offspring, if you will, of plants I imported years and years ago, well over 30 years, okay? And I always take cuttings, I always leave samples around my property so that if I lose the main item, I'll always have something else. And yep, this is my main tree, and that's like a 2-foot pot that I was able to pick up several years ago. I actually sold this tree for $250 and realized I couldn't really part with it, and so I kept it, and I mean, it's developed a whole lot since then, but yep. And again, I cut the top out of that, and I'm going to be cleaning up and working on this season, and I let the branches grow. The tree was kind of growing, and the apex was narrower than the rest of the tree, and I don't like that pointy top affair. You know, I like a more wider, rounded crown on maples. Now, if it's a juniper, that's a different story. That's a tanuki that I've just pretty much just letting it grow wild. No special deal with it. That juniper right there, I've been growing it for some time now in that pot just to try to produce a giant juniper for work later on. And we're walking. More stuff that I'm working on. This is kind of my garden walk. Oh, the Trident maple, small leaf. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one, I think I lost that one. But I made some success here. And that's why these are flagged, so that they don't get confused with my normal Trident maples. Okay, I've got this right here, which is a normal Trident maple. Same there. And right here I've got root over rock in the ground. But this is what I want to show you too. That is my Naruto. Trident maple. I've cut it back. I've cleaned some parts of it, and my pot, the table underneath collapsed. So I'll be working on this, but this is huge. It's massive. And now this is the other thing too. The tree right in there is a Trident maple that I just removed an air layer from. There you have it right there. And I did some grafting on it also. So that's a pretty large Trident maple. And this is the top out of that Trident maple. Right there, and that's a full-size tree, so it's taller than 12 to 15 feet, and a normal size trunk, I think that's about 6 inches right there. And that's another Trident maple that I dug, and I want that lower branch there, which is extended, to grow out, and I'll be cutting back this top pretty soon. This is the top out of that Naruto that I'm working on. I was air layering it, and the roots didn't take fully. There's a little bit of roots on there, but aside from that, it didn't take fully, and I've been delaying the work on that tree for a few years now, and the delay is over. So hopefully I can get that stump to root also. Now, the Trident maple, root over rock, and the extended root. This is one of the Trident maples that I was speaking about when I spoke about growing the longer roots in that culvert for root over rock and extended roots. Okay, that's a beautiful tree right there. That's a crabapple profusion. Actually, this is Callaway, and I just dug it up, and this was attached to it, and you can see the stump right there. The callus around it developed. That was a sucker coming out on that low to the bottom, and so I scored this part over here mounded up some soil, and it calloused more than I knew it would. So this part right here, I'll end up carving on that, and I'll either stick a rock in it and make it part of the design. Let's say, excuse me, like that. Okay, I'll get a different rock, and the rock will be placed in there, and it'll become part of the design. So anyway, always a way to make things work. Another Trident maple that I grew in that culvert affair, long roots. So this will be either placed on a rock after I grow it and get those lower roots to have finer roots on it. Okay, so once I cut these out of the ground, the roots at the base were disturbed, and so I want to grow this back for a season and then let it grow in place. Okay, more thoughts and ideas in my garden, because I need to document this. This is a Trident maple. That was a handmade crescent pot, and you can see the wire going that way, and then the upright. Okay, so I'll cut this long extension back so that more energy would go to the vertical upright to create my apex. This apex is coming out also, and if I like it, I'll either let it become the main apex. I'll use this apex as a depth branch so I can bring it down some as well as cut it, and I'll use that for depth on that side, and then this will be a new apex. Now the thing for doing that is this will grow much faster than this because it's young. It's a young shoot. It's on the main branch right now, and it just has so much energy coming to it. So if I want to do that, and I'll give it, you know, this season, and I'll take a look, and then all of these other shoots. But again, getting older, I'm thinking, well, I know I'm going to do bonsai. I know I'm going to just be piddling around and doing this and that. What can I do? Seedlings. You don't have to spend 20, 30, 40 years to get a plant to look like something. You just have to style it. You have to have imagination and use it. Okay? This is a fig tree, and I've got to do carving on it. Alright? I'm using my space. Cuttings of winged elm. I just put that in there. So, and those are some podocarpus stumps that I'm letting grow back. Alright, now, and that's a Tanuki procumbens nana. I'll have to clean it up again. But look, this right here was, I wish I could show you the before, but that is awesome. Chinese elm. It's a Chinese elm, and that is just awesome. And like I said, sometimes I even amaze myself. So and eventually it'll go away, but for right now, that's a Japanese green maple. I believe that was an air layer, and I've carved on it and wired it some, and you can see the little Trident maple back there, just a little seedling. Well, it's actually older than a seedling. That tree is probably 6 or 7 years old now, but I've grown it in a small container. But it's just a seedling, basically. All right, here we have another elm. That was a root piece that I grew from a root once I dug up a particular tree that I had in the ground. And it's nice, but I love that other one better. This is so unusual, and that's the appeal there. and I worked on these figs yesterday. That's the top out of this tree right here. It was taller, and I didn't really want that to be that way, so I air layered that piece. So yesterday I carved on this one and put some lime sulfur on the wood, and that's a little fig right there in the S shape, just kind of unusual. Lots of work to be done. Root over rock. I have to clean this one up. That was a Trident maple. This is a Japanese green maple. But lots of work to be done. And this is one of my basically seedlings. It used to be. I grafted different pieces on there to enhance the roots over the rock. And you know, whenever I walk past here, I manipulate the branches a little bit and I see where I need to wire it. But small tree, nice tree, not heavy, and it gives me good pleasure in working with it. Root over rock. I tried different techniques for growing my roots, and this I grew basically in this configuration less than 3 years. Okay, I've got trees in the back in the ground that are still languishing using quote unquote the techniques in the books. Okay, my system works better, and that is a Chinese bird plum. I just potted it up, air layer from, if you look back there through the crepe myrtles, the green beyond the upright window in that Pepsi stand, that's a big old giant Chinese bird plum, which needs to be trimmed back. But anyway, another root over rock, Trident maple. And this one is a little taller than the other. And I've got the black electrical tape on there to keep the roots clasped. And the soil is going to be washed away as I water, as it rains, hits it, as the setup dries out a little bit. But also the tape helps protect some of the tender roots by holding that moisture a little bit longer as the roots are exposed to UV and the normal elements. Here's another elm, Chinese elm, that I worked on yesterday. This one I really struggled and fought with to come up with this, because I was nearly to the place of cutting it down to this branch right here and basically starting all over. But I think that's a pretty good shape there for a tree that I've been growing for about 10, 12 years now. And so I don't lose all of that time. I don't like it as nearly as much as the other two, but yeah, good enough for me. That's a boxwood, a bottle brush tree that I'm working on. And we've seen this one before in one of my videos, root over rock. So I'll be cleaning it up here this season. And I'll pull it down from the pot, work on the roots, and hopefully get it to lower just a little bit more. And boom, Bob's my uncle. And this is a large Trident maple, and I'm developing branches on this, and I see that I'm getting some secondary and tertiary branches beginning to develop on it. It's slow going, but it's getting there. And that Trident right there, I really like it. These two trees are the same age, and I started working on them at the same time. different configurations. And the trees themselves were just as tall, you know, one to the other. But that tree had lower branches on it, where this tree had no lower branches at the time. And so that tree, in my opinion, deserved being chopped down even lower. And I grew them in the ground for a season or so, and then brought them up into the pots. So again, depending on if I get to it or not, hey, they come out of the pot and they get cleaned up and whacked on some more. This was an air layer of a Japanese green maple, and what, I took it off August, September, October sometime. So it's not a full year yet, but it was on the tree during the year. And a little laurel oak tree, a nice little affair right there, nice rounded crown. And right here, Zelkovas. That is the top out of the tree in the blue pot here. And I'm waiting to see what I get. I removed these in, again, September sometime, November. I removed that from the top of this one and then wired these. So we'll see how that progresses. And this was basically my second Chinese elm. This was a collected item. My first is one that I bought from Brussels. And again, most of my trees around here either come from these two trees, you know, which I didn't show you the ones from the tree from Brussels, Bonsai. But anyway, this one year I had it in the pot and it did not leaf out. And I waited for about 9 months. It didn't leaf out. So I said, if you're not going to show, I can use the pot somewhere else. So I pulled this out of the pot, stuck it in the ground, hoping that I could get some life out of the roots. And a year and a half, after 2 years, as I'm watching this thing periodically, lo and behold, some greenery. And so I let it grow, and wow, what a massive affair. This tree is nothing, basically nothing of the original tree. This was the upright for the original tree right here. And you can see that vein following through there, and then it disappears. That's it. Other than that, everything else has regrown. And so I'll be working on this probably. And again, if I keep that going, it'll be a fine tree. But here we have another tree. Basically, I'm just growing this just for branches. And here's another that I'm growing for branches, kind of in a leaning style. And this is a root over rock from a root cutting. And my graft here failed, so I have to reattach that and stick another graft up. So, and there is my Phoenix Procumbens nana. And I've got several figs here that I've been working on for the longest. This group of Japanese green maples, I'm going to air layer the tops out of several of these, and that is going to be reduced probably by 2/3. So I see the configuration that it's in now. It's nice, but hey, shorten it up will be even nicer and more manageable. That's a young grove that I started exposed roots like the year before last. And I got to work on that pine tree, Japanese black pine. These are, they look like seedlings, but they're not old seedlings. These are old trees now. pretty much these last few trees that I've shown you, they're the same age. It's just that they're grown in smaller containers. And that's one Japanese green maple right there. But these will continue to grow in small containers. And like this right here, in that little 6-inch flat round pot, I'm going to try to go ahead and do the same with these. I can cut down a gallon pot and get the same effect like that pot right there. It's a little larger than this, but it's close enough to what I need. There's a root over rock elm configuration. Just some cuttings I had. And by the way, I call these my indicator plants, like this plant right here. I keep these around to kind of gauge how well things are being watered, how they're faring. This rock, for one, I mean, that's just a piece of concrete that I found somewhere. Stuck some dirt on it, stuck some trees on it. The pot broke on that juniper. You think I put it back in the pot? No, no, no. And I leave those around to kind of gauge how things are growing. That little ivy right there in a little 4-inch pot. And see, at a glance, if those things are doing well, then I'm not worried about anything. That little Trident maple right there, just as old as anything. When I was talking about the 100 seedlings I pulled out of this is one. That tree right there is another, and that tree back there is another. These on the rocks right here are a different lot, but I grew this with the two that you saw potted up. Now this one, in my mind's eye, this one is never going to leave this yard for some time to come. In other words, we call this mine. It is so impressive in my mind's eye that, you know, I have to pick me one. Here we have that was a cutting of a Trident maple, and it's on the rock, and I reset it yesterday. I raised it up in the pot and rewrapped the roots, and it's coming along really nicely. Trident maple right there, big air layer. Okay, so this is the 5th year I've had this air layer, 4th or 5th year, and so I work on it. Remember this, if you do a large air layer, treat it before you go to air layer on it, and treat it after you air layer on it. A wounded tree is sensed by bugs and pests, okay? And you air layer in the spring typically, and that's when the pests come out. So I've learned that with other things. I mean, you get the little sugar ants, we call them, the little black ants. They'll be all in there. And then, of course, if you got different kind of borers in your area, again, just treat your plant when they're large trees. Like that branch right here in front of us, that's almost 1.5 to 2 inches, okay? Something like that and larger, I would treat, okay? I've had trees in the yard that I worked on the roots, and I noticed the little, I mean, when you cut the tree, the sap comes out, and then the pests, ants and such, they love that sap. And of course, if you get your spring pests come in, well, they need the nourishment too, and then the ants want to eat them, and you get this sort of thing. So again, treat your trees before and after. Root over rock, Trident maple. So I worked on it, well, it was probably in December. It was a nice day or whatever, so I wired it and kind of changed what I had going at the time. Well, anyway, there's lots more to be seen around here, and that's one of the fig trees, plum trees I was talking about earlier that a friend of mine gave me. That moss is just awesome. Just going through the roots instead of crawling up over the roots. And I cut back on this, I water it, fertilize it, and basically the shape that it comes out will just be clip and grow. My little collection of pomegranates that will be trimmed on and worked on. You can see that wounded area on that one. I'll do that rock thing with that also. But mainly, I love my Tridents. I love my Procumbens nana. Shimpaku's okay, but a little temperamental in my area. I make it work. This is my stand of Trident maples primarily. There are crepe myrtles in here also, including big huge stumps that I need to dig up and reset. You know, I'm growing more crepe myrtles from cuttings. You can see in the far background the darker stumps back there, but again, there's plenty to do, lots to be seen, and I thank you for your time.